Did the Maesters destroy magic in Westeros? And, well, I guess the world beyond. According to Archmaester Marwyn, the Maesters conspire to end the Age of the Dragons. He tells Samuel Tarly, "Who do you think killed the dragons the last time around? Gallant men in shining armor? The world the Citadel is building has no place for sorcery, or prophecy, or glass candles, much less dragons." This accusation is huge. It suggests that the Maesters actively work to eliminate dragons, and by extension, the magic that is tied to them. But how did they do that? And why? Well, stay tuned, and we will get into that today. In the heart of an ancient god's wood, where the leaves remember and trees never forget, the old gods still listen. Welcome to Whispers Through the Godswood. Here we journey through the legends of Westeros and beyond, uncover lost lore, unravel ancient prophecy, and breathe life into the myths that have shaped the Seven Kingdoms. Listen well, for every whisper tells a story. Knowledge is power. That's what the Maesters of Westeros want us to believe. But what if their pursuit of knowledge wasn't just about understanding the world around them, but about controlling it? What if the Maesters weren't just scholars, but kingmakers, manipulators, and the silent killers of magic itself? For centuries, they have shaped Westerosi history, influencing kings and lords, advising rulers on everything from law and war to when to plant crops. But there is one thing that they do fear, one thing that they seem to absolutely despise, and that's magic. But if magic is real, then their science, their order, their power means like little to nothing, and they know it. So, to understand things in the now, we kind of should start to look at the way back to the past and explore how things got to where we are now. So let's begin. Before the Andal invasion, about 6,000 years ago, the children of the forest were deeply connected to magic, using green seers and weirwood trees and old spells in probably everyday life. When the first men arrived, they, of course, clashed with the children, but eventually the first men did adapt the religion of the children, the old gods. However, when the Andals invaded, they brought with them the faith of the Seven, which rejected magic completely and the old gods by, connection to being magical. The Maesters, as allies to the faith, helped push out other beliefs such as the old gods, painting them as barbaric and just nothing more than superstition. This helped to sever the children's magical influence in the world of Westeros and push them to near extinction, to the point that in today's story, like pretty much everyone in Westeros think that the children are all dead if they ever truly existed at all. So, promoting the faith of the Seven as civilized, while demonizing the old gods and green seers as primitive and dangerous, is a tactic that we've seen in our own world. Um, the Native Americans were called barbaric and uncivilized and dirty, and made it where it was like a little bit better to take them over. We were, civilizing them, right? Teaching them how to be decent, real human beings. But that's kind of, I think, the same thing that the faith of the Seven and the Maesters did when they came into Westeros. They made the people that live there feel like this is, again, barbaric, uncivilized. You're dirty primitives. Join the new enlightened age and become part of the faith of the Seven and believe not in magic, but in science. Then, 400 years before Aegon's conquest, the Valyrians were masters of magic, using fire and blood magic and all kinds of sorcery, and whatever dragon lore secrets that they possessed to conquer the world around them. The doom of Valyria, as we all know, destroyed their civilization, but it's unclear what actually caused it. Some fans like to theorize that the Maesters may have played a role in this, or at least collaborated in the fall, because it eliminated the largest, greatest magical empire, their biggest rival when it comes to magic and science, you know? So maybe I don't know. I don't think so. David Lightbringer, his theory about how um, Aenar Targaryen and Daenerys the Dreamer and all of that, that around that time period that they got together with um, the Faceless Men and some prophecy of Lannister Gold. You should go check out his video on the fall of Valyria and all that stuff. I kind of like that idea a little bit, that maybe it was an inside job with Valyria. How, Targaryens the only ones that survived, really. But I like his idea more than just the Maesters like collaborating with people. Maybe they worked with the Faceless Men, but the Faceless Men are kind of magical too. So I wouldn't see the Citadel kind of like working with them. But again, David Lightbringer, his little theory on that is actually pretty cool. But anyway, so the Valyrian freehold and all of its knowledge of blood magic, of dark sorcery, of dragon binding and fire sorcery was lost or hidden. And I think the Maesters really did have something to do with that. But we'll go more into why the Maesters maybe suppressing Valyrian magic in just a moment. So 300 years before the time as we know it in Game of Thrones, with Dany and Jon and Cersei and all that stuff, Aegon Targaryen conquered the seven kingdoms, or well, six. Dorne came later, but he united Westeros for the most part with his dragons. And this was something that the Maesters openly could not oppose. He had dragons, big, vicious dragons, and they couldn't really like stop Aegon from declaring himself king and taking over the seven kingdoms. They weren't fighters or nothing, so they knew they were going to have to work behind the scenes within the shadows and things like that of different lords and houses within Westeros and within the Red Keep eventually itself. They did not like the polygamy, the marriage between siblings, or any of that blood magic. They would have tried desperately to suppress all of that. And you see how many of the different Targaryens throughout the family tree have married into different houses within Westeros, from Arryns to Baratheons to Blackwoods. Okay, um, and I'm sure the Maesters were beside whichever king or whatever was ruling at the time, going, well, I know you guys like usually would marry your daughter to your son or whatever, but this Baratheon, I'm sure they were doing things like that, not just to get the Targaryens to be friendly with the other houses within Westeros, but to weaken their bloodline, to weaken their customs and traditions, to make them assimilate more into Westeros and be more Westerosi and not so much Valyrian. Uh, Pat Cat, stop. You are always being so annoying. Hi. So next we would really the next big pivotal moment that the Macers would have been able to like start manipulating things and or continue to manipulate things to bring about the end of House Targaryen would have been about 129 to 131 AC, which was the infamous Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen family feud that pretty much brought down the House of the Dragon themselves. But was it really themselves? It was the Maesters, right? Maesters, man, I really think it's Maesters. They're dirty. But the Dance of Dragons was a devastating war between the two Targaryens, the Blacks and the Greens, Rhaenyra and Daemon versus Queen Alicent and her son Aegon II. It was a war that resulted in nearly all of the dragons dying, and many of the members of House Targaryen dying horrific, awful deaths. Okay, if you're like, oh no, she just spoiled House of the Dragon, the TV show, because she said everyone pretty much dies. Dude, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry. You my bad. Okay. But things do not go good during the Dance of the Dragons. And I think the people that mostly benefited from this, it wasn't the small folks, it wasn't any of the other houses, it was the Maesters. they got rid of so many dragons. They got rid of so many Targaryens. Damon, who they were all probably like, just like Otto Hightower and all them, like, Damon's, he may be bad. Yeah, I don't know if we want him to be king. But the Maesters, I think, were the ones who came out of that war totally like skipping through the tulips, okay, happy as can be, pig in mud, okay. Many believe though that these maesters supported, or if not just supported, totally encouraged this war, knowing that the deaths of the dragons would mean the end of magic, because they're not stupid, okay. As much as I don't particularly like the maesters, I don't like anyone that's going to control history and tell me, or anyone else, what the actual, this is set in stone. And we know in real world things are crazy. You never know, okay? It's, you say it was this, and then it turns out years later something was discovered, and oh, that was a so and so. Okay, it happens in real world. And for the maesters to be so very controlling over everything when it comes to knowledge and all, I'm Catholic and I love my Catholic church, but back in the day, they used to be really bad about controlling the knowledge, and not always for the good of the people, but for their own personal gain. The Citadel is much like that same kind of organization. They have great power, and they wield it and cover things up when it suits them, when it doesn't fit into their perfect little square box of reality. And they, I think, would have known that, because they've been around for like ever, like I just pointed out, like hundreds and hundreds of years before the Targaryens in Game of Thrones and Starks and all of that. They've been around a long time and they know some stuff. They have a citadel full of books and scrolls and all of that. They're very learned, so they would know that the dragons brought magic, that somehow they were connected to it. And maybe they were like thinking maybe, and then as the dragons died off during the Dance of the Dragons, and the magic of the world started to decrease, I'm sure that these learned men would have started to figure this out, and really, at that point, really started to push to bring down the House of the Dragon. Because again, there is no room in the world that these learned men of the Citadel, these maesters, archmaesters, and all of that, there's no room for magic in that world. It would undermine so much of what they have said, again, set up in that little box of what they know to be true and right and all of that. Magic is chaos and unpredictable, and they wouldn't like that. They would want to get rid of it. And I think they would figure out pretty quickly during, or if not right after, Dance of the Dragons, that these dragons were very much tied to magic. So by the year 150 AC, the time of Aegon III, the last of the dragons were small, weak, and sickly. I'm saying that they were like no bigger than a cat, okay? And you guys have seen Bad Cat. If you see my video, she's a little bitty thing. Um, so that's like, oh my goodness, that's more like a little fire lizard or something. But they were sick and weakly, and many people theorized that the Maester's poison or did some genetic manipulation to destroy these dragons within just a couple of generations. After the last dragon died, all the magic in the world seemed to begin to really decline and pretty much just disappear. The extinction of the dragons marked the decline of magic itself, and the Maesters seemed to have won, or so they thought. So, by 150 to the present time, in the Game of Thrones book, show, whatever you want to like, that time period before Dany's dragons hatch. The dragons were all gone, and the Maesters seemed to be working very hard to erase all serious study of magic from Westerosi culture. They mocked prophecies. They described mystics and all as crazy. They again controlled written history. the winners write history. I've said it before in other videos, and because it's true, the losers aren't like the ones that keep in record of everything, you know. Um, so the winners control it all, and at that point, the Maesters had won. They believed that the glass candles were that which were we think allowed originally allowed like communication over vast distances, like almost like a cell phone, but these big old glass candles. But they considered it to be a myth by pretty much all the maesters in the Citadel. They even have like this special ceremony at one point where to be like start to really become a maester, you like have to sit in this room with a glass candle for like 3 days, I think, and try to get it to work. And no one is able to do it, and it's all a test or trial, whatever, to prove that there is no magic. And but Archmaester Marwyn, he's got a glass candle. He's been playing with that candle, and he shows Sam at one point. But the rest of the maesters like totally dismiss it and lead younger maesters, younger recruits, people coming up within the Citadel to believe that there is no magic. Um, and it's messed up because there is magic. But I think some examples of this, the suppression of knowledge of magic, is that they call Melisandre's fire magic trickery, which in the beginning she was getting a little tricky. She was talking about throwing this into the fire and it makes the whoosh and, makes a grown man like piss himself or whatever. But as the books go on, you see that her magic, it is somewhat real. She is getting visions in the flame. There are things about her, those dang shadow babies that she'd be birthing. That stuff is weird and creepy and totally magical. And she herself says it's only getting stronger. And as she's at the wall, is like, oh, this feels good. I can do some stuff up here. But magic is coming back after Dany's dragons, of course. But they say that Melisandre's magic is trickery. They dismiss greenseers and wargs as nothing more than fairy tale myths and legends. And we know for a fact that Bran is warging his old butt off. Jojen Reed is having his visions. Bloodraven is in a tree. There are children of the forest. Arya is warging Nymeria from like across the narrow sea. Magic and working and green saying is real, but the maesters won't let anyone believe that. They teach the children of the lords and ladies that there's no magic. Okay, Maester Lewin tells Bran like a couple of times, there's no magic. You're just a little boy with a very active imagination, and we and Bran know different. They discourage rulers from taking magic seriously or seeking advice from magical people like Melisandre. They're always trying to cover up that aspect, or if not covering up at that point, just simply dismissing it as just BS. That's nothing. They playing with like potions and powders, and it's still science. It's still science. They're just calling it magic because they're using powders and potions. But Mel's doing some real stuff. Bran's doing some real stuff. Um, but they control the historical narrative and again spread skepticism and disbelief about all magic. Maesters of Westeros are known to be again skeptical of magic and of supernatural things. They view themselves as rational scholars, learned men, okay, and often again dismiss or downplay or even erase events that involve sorcery, prophecy, or even legendary characters. Mar- Archmaester Marwyn, one of the few, again, in the Citadel who embrace magic. They even call him like Marwyn the Mage, okay? Um, yeah, he embraces magic and everything and accuses the rest of the Citadel of I'm sorry, tongue tied all of a sudden, accused the Citadel of actively suppressing magic and claims that, again, that they played a massive role in the downfall of the dragons. There are some magical events that the Maesters may have downplayed, rewritten, or just totally covered up in order to shape the narrative of magic being nothing more than something of myth and of legend. And we'll go into a couple of those real quick. A couple of different events that I think that the Maesters would downplay, rewrite or all but erase if they could would be the Long Night, which most of us know that the Long Night was a legendary period that happened thousands of years ago that lasted for a whole generation, where the White Walkers, the others, invaded Westeros. This time brought with it the legendary being known as Azor Ahai, the last hero, who is said to have wielded the flaming sword and led the charge into the fight against the others, the White Walkers. Um, I think that also would be the hammer of the waters, where the children used and green magic to bring about a flood that wiped across the arm of Dorne, hoping to stop the invasion of the First Men, and potentially maybe even getting like Moat Cailin to try to stop them later on, because it obviously didn't work. First Men kept coming, and so Moat Cailin I may have been again washed away a little bit with a second Hammer of the Waters that turned it into Moat Cailin, a big swampy area and unlivable with yuckiness. Okay, but that could have been an event as well that the Maesters would have loved to use for their own narrative, more science versus magic. They could have been like it was more of a natural cataclysm, something like that. We see in our own worlds when tsunamis happen from like an earthquake that went down in the ocean, and the wave just totally devastates the land that it comes into because of the power and the amount of water that comes with it. Um, the long night could have been nothing more than a famine, a cold winter that lasted just a little too long, and people used the others as a reason why their people died. We can come up with all different kinds of things because stuff like that really does happen. Again, you see it in our own real world. But we know that Westeros is not our world, and Westeros is full of magic and the different things that have been whispered as legend and myth and magic really do exist and are coming back. One of the other things I think that the Maesters would have loved to put the damper on would be the doom of Valyria. And I think that that is a big one because, again, as I mentioned earlier, it was one of their biggest rivals, really, when it comes to science versus magic. You've got a whole world full of, or a whole country full of people that you're using blood magic and sorcery and dragon binding and all of that. So their doom, I think, would be something that the Maesters would definitely want to keep quiet, and that they would force their own narrative of it was nothing more than the volcanic eruptions and all of that. Hence, it being something more like I was mentioned earlier with David Lightbringer's theory of the faceless men coming in and taking out some of the sorcerers and doing what they do to bring about the destruction of Valyria because of Aenar Targaryen and his daughter Dany's wanting to be like the only dragon lords left, and then you got all kinds of power, right? But either way, the Valyria, the location itself and everything that goes along with it, I think the Maesters would love to keep quiet, and that they have worked a lot to keep it quiet, um, especially not wanting people to go there and discover or rediscover the magic that is kept hidden from the populace, especially magic that potentially may have gone wrong or was a divine punishment by God against something that would totally be in stark contrast to the Maester's view of just strictly science and knowledge and things of fact and that you can touch, feel, and examine. And magic is something you can't do that with. And God and some big punishment from God would definitely not be something that the Maesters would be down with wanting normal people to believe in and all of that. I think that they framed it as a natural disaster, ignoring the theories that were suggested, that it was caused by blood magic, dragon sorcery, a curse, God, whatever. I believe that they have suppressed this knowledge of Valyrian sorcery to survive. Again, they want to downplay it and the connection of Valyria and dragons and magic being lost with the loss of all of these dragons, including the Targaryen dragons at that point. They want to keep it pushed out. They don't want the normal everyday person believing in magic. They want them to continue to trust the Maesters so that the Citadel can lead the world around them and build it into what they want. The Maesters of the Citadel, they present Old Valyria as a ruined, cursed land that no one should ever go visit. The doom which destroyed Valyria over 4 centuries before the main story, Game of Thrones with Dany, Jon, all that good stuff, um, is described vaguely and in terrifying terms when talked about. The doom was referred to as the greatest cataclysm in the history of the world, but the Maesters offer no magical explanation, only that natural forces destroyed it. They insist that the area is cursed, filled with twisted beasts and smoking chasms. It's cursed, but there ain't no magic, right? But they also call the smoking sea, call it the smoking sea. No one returns from it, they say. Anyone who sails there will never come back. Some maesters call Valyria a lesson in hubris, a warning against temptation, tampering with sorcery, and being tempted by unnatural powers. In the world of ice and fire, the maesters write, the land of the long summer are accursed. No man can go there and live. Woe to those who try. But note this comes from the Maesters, not first hand accounts. Their authority is based on interpreting and limiting what knowledge is actually shared. The Maesters strongly discourage any exploration of Valyria. They present it as a hellish wasteland, label any interest in Valyria or its relics like dragon eggs, glass candles as foolish or dangerous. Yet, despite all of that, Valyrian artifacts are still hold tremendous power. Valyrian steel, dragon horns, glass candles, all of these things that we have seen in the world of ice and fire in the present day of that world, and they still hold magic. The dragon horn that Euron has blown, that poor guy's like chest is like he's burned from within. There is magic within the horn. It calls to Victarion as he's making his way to Dany. He feels pulled to this dragon horn. Valerian steel holds great power. You see how it can like take down a white and just like totally mess them up. And again, Maester Archmaester Marwyn the maid is using glass candles, and it's I can't remember who it was. Uh, I one of the people on YouTube or Reddit, I can't remember, said something about one of the new things that's supposed to be coming introduced in House of the Dragon season 3 is going to be some cool artifact that we've all been waiting to see, and some theorize that it may just very well be a glass candle, and that would be really awesome. But we see that these things actually do hold magic, great magical power, but the Citadel represses it, keeps it hidden. The Citadel possesses some of these artifacts. Again, Morrowind has glass candle, but they only allow a select few to study them. Why? Right? Like, why would you do that? And again, I mentioned earlier the little trial that they do where they have the young maesters try to get these candles to work just to prove that there is no magic. Again, why would you go to all of that trouble if there was no magic? Right? I don't I don't get it. They're hiding something. Now this is where I think things kind of get a little interesting with the maesters and their old Valyria cover up. Um, the Maesters are using grayscale to keep people away. When someone is infected with grayscale and deemed unworthy or incurable, they are sometimes sent to the ruins of Valyria, exiled east. This is known through tales and history, sailors and stallmen gathering in the ruins and on the shore of the Sorrows, a haunted place near Valyria. In the Dance of the Dragon, when Tywin Lannister travels down, not Tywin, I'm sorry, when Tyrion Lannister travels down the Rhoyne and into the Sorrows, he encounters stone men, victims of grayscale, exiled and left to rot in these ruins. Some were once nobles, scholars, or even children. Look at little Princess Shireen Baratheon. She got grayscale. If they wouldn't have been able to stop it, she would have either been killed or sent to Old Valyria as a little kid to like live out the rest of her life as a little kid with grayscale. It's messed up. So why send the afflicted there though? It's like I know that throughout our own history we have done things to isolate people when they're sick, but to send them to Old Valyria, just the voyage alone to have to like take someone all the way there would cost a lot of money when you could just like, take care of it somewhere within Westeros and not do that. So I think that the Maesters are totally using grayscale as yet one more tool to keep people away from Old Valyria. Um, we can again take a look at our own world, and when people had like things like leprosy, they were isolated, not just for health reasons, but because people didn't want to see them. Don't want to look at that. It's terrible, but it's true. They wanted to erase them from society. Um, Heretics or seers were accused of madness or disease to justify banishment or even execution. So we've done things in our own world, and so we kind of like can see how sending some people to Old Valyria is a little extreme. We had many different places again in our own history where we sent the afflicted, and they had to live there and die there, and it was horrible. But from Westeros all the way to Old Valyria is a little extreme. And why not again cure it? If they could like cure little Princess Shireen, and why couldn't they like help other people? I know it's a deadly disease and it's like transmitted by touch and all that, and there's got to be something other than sending them to Old Valyria. And again, I think that it's because the Maesters want to use it. Um, so the question is, could the Maesters really be using scale as an excuse to bury people with prophetic dreams, magical potential, or knowledge of forbidden lore? Like have someone like use it at that point as like chemical warfare almost, make someone very sick and then they have to be sent away. Um, Perhaps using these poor individuals just, if nothing else, to keep the curious people away from Valyria because no one wants to get grayscale and have to live out the rest of their days there or being killed by, because you ain't going to get fixed. Even though obviously somehow or another they were able to cure Serene. So why are people not being cured from grayscale? And the Citadel would have the knowledge to do this if we like rely on someone like the TV show and the later seasons with Sam and Jorah Mormont and him, curing him and stuff. It's possible. So why is the Citadel constantly sending these people there? Again, I think it is to suppress the magic of Valyria and to keep others from rediscovering the magic that would bring back dragons or whatever, and ignite the flame that would engulf the world with magic once more. The Maesters portray Old Valyria as a cursed, ruined place, but their unwavering fear, their banishment of grayscale victims, and their misleading of or their dismissal of magical signs all point to something more. They may not just be afraid of what lies in the ruins, they may be actively hiding it. In a world where dragons stir, glass candles burn, and green seers dream, the truth of Valyria's magic may rise again, whether the Maesters like it or not. When Daenerys Targaryen and her dragons return to Westeros, things are going to be flipped on their head. Um, when Dany's dragons were born at the end of the Game of Thrones book, it marked and the TV show, it marked a pivotal moment in the story, the rebirth of magic into the world of Westeros and Essos. While magic never fully disappeared from this world, as we know, it had been waning for centuries, and the rebirth of the dragons seemed to have reawakened, or strengthened this magical force across the world. Melisandre's magic grows stronger. The Red Priestess of Allure starts to show greater powers after the dragons are born. Her abilities to look into the flame improve. She begins performing more potent feats like birthing the shadow assassins, influencing people, influencing dreams and visions. She herself suggests that the rise of the dragons has strengthened the power of her god. Quaithe and the glass candles. In Karth, the shadow binder appears to Danny and speaks in riddles all the time. Meanwhile, the glass candles, magical obsidian candles that are used by sorcerers of Old Valyria, are said to have started to burn again after being dormant for generations. Again, Archmaester Marwyn even suggests that the dragon's return is responsible for this. The pyromancers in King's Landing, the guild that does all of that fire for the King's Landing, has been producing wildfire fire and saying that it is easier to produce and that the wildfire is more potent and that this happened after the dragon's return. They openly state that the powers are growing stronger and link this directly to the presence of the living dragon in the world once more. And then you also have the rise of the undead and magical creatures in the north. White walkers and whites become more active north of the wall. While they have existed for thousands of years, their movement increased dramatically after the birth of the dragons. It's like they sense something, okay? Sense the magic coming back. The numbers of the whites, these dead corpses and all are growing. We don't know how many actually, but it's clear that the numbers are growing and that the whites are pushing farther and farther south, signaling that both ice and fire magic are rising in power together. Then you also have things like the dire wolves and the Stark children. The Stark children and their bond with their dire wolves have deepened. Some of them, especially Bran and John, show more clear signs of warging, especially especially when they're entering the minds of their wolves. You can like totally see it's like it's growing more and more intense. They are learning to understand and use this power better. Bran later learns to be a green seer, another ancient magical ability associated with the children of the forest. And then you have Arya. Arya, who can still enter Nymeria from across the narrow sea. She works into cats and bravos and uses them to spy and do whatever she's doing. She hasn't been taught like Bran and doesn't have a mentor like Bloodraven to show her these things, but that power is still there. And while the dire wolves are born both are born before the dragons actually hatch in the book and the show, the fact that both of these creatures, long thought extinct, appear in the same generation, suggesting a world being shaped or reshaped by magic. And then you have the reveal of ancient beliefs and powers. You have Blood Raven, the three-eyed crow, becoming more active and reaching out to Bran during this time. The children of the forest are starting to appear and show Bran how to access this ancient magic. Beric Dondarrion is able to use R'hllor and resurrect Thoris of Myr, bringing back Lady Stoneheart much later. Magic is often said to be tied to the presence of the dragons. The return of these creatures, considered magical incarnations of fire and blood, appear to have restored the balance of the magical forces within this world. As Daenerys' dragons grow, so does the influence of magic, both benevolent and dark. But Danny coming back is going to have to really watch the Maesters because, as we've seen through this video at this point, I hope I've made it, somewhat clear that the Maesters have had their hand in totally destroying the dragons, and they will not be happy when Daenerys returns to the land of Westeros and has her dragons. She will be faced with many different enemies, but I think that the main one that's going to be behind this, the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz. Don't look at the little man behind the curtain, right? Because he's out there doing stuff. And I think that she is going to really have to worry about the Maesters. They are going to be one of the most dangerous opponents that she has. They have the ear of so many lords in Westeros, lords that have taken their advice and trusted them for hundreds and hundreds of years. the way it's been done. And so she's going to have to really like watch these maesters, because I think that they will try to undermine her as much as they possibly can, as much as they have been doing already and have done to her family in the past. They will use their influence again to turn lords against her. They may spread false rumors about her and her dragons being uncontrollable or being mad like her father, which they kind of already are doing. They could even sabotage her dragons, because, like we were talking earlier, there's a chance that the Maesters were the main reason that the dragons started to diminish in power anyway and become smaller and smaller and sicklier until the point that there were no more dragons. Um, they could continue to do this, use some of those old texts in that, Citadel, and figure out how we did that and implement it again and try to take down Danny's magical creatures. They may support rival claimants like Aegon Fagon, okay, like the fake Aegon. Okay, they could support him, or even someone like Jon Snow, and try to bring Dany down that way, and in turn like weaken her claim and maybe her dragon somehow with that. Um, but they could frame her as a dangerous tyrant and push for perhaps a safer ruler like Fagon or Jon Snow or even Bran Stark if he gets taken over by the three-eyed raven. But it could happen. They could definitely be totally undermining her. So while the White Walkers are the clear threat to the entire world, the Maesters may be the hidden enemy, just as dangerous. They don't want to use swords or sorcery, but they rewrite history, control kings, and have erased magic itself from this world already. Their war on dragons may have kept Westeros in the dark for many centuries, but Daenerys Targaryen's return threatens to undo their greatest victory. So while the Maesters may try to stop her, they may try to poison her, may try to poison her dragons. Who knows? How far will they be willing to go to ensure that the age of magic never returns? I hope you enjoyed sitting with me today for, I think I'm going on like 50 minutes at this point. It's probably going to be one of my longest videos. But I hope you enjoyed the theory that the Maesters were trying to, or have tried, and potentially succeeded for the most part until Danny came around to kill magic within the world. I think that they really did have their hand in it. And if not killing magic themselves, have really worked hard to erase it, to suppress it, to reshape the world into one of science and loyalty to learned men, not magic or gods. Until next time, bye.